Hi everybody, this is Anne. The term Majolica is an ancient pottery term. Today, the process consists of coating low-fired earthenware clay with a white glaze, then painting imagery on top of that glaze with ceramic pigments. It's then fired again to achieve durable, crisp, bright imagery. Now, I don't work with earthenware clay. My clay fires to cone 5-6, but I thought it'd be interesting to experiment with a similar technique with the supplies that I have available and see if firing to the hotter temperatures destroys the imagery or if I can still achieve a crisp design. Now here's a great example of how the Majolica technique is being done today. This piece by Linda Arbuckle was done on earthenware clay. You can see that the low firing keeps the imagery from melting and bleeding or even fading. Now, I didn't have time to experiment with homemade stains and glazes, but I had plenty of commercial glazes and underglazes that I could test and see how they interact with my white glaze. For the test, I bisque fired several slabs of clay, brushed on my white liner glaze, then brushed various colored glazes and underglazes over that. The first thing I noticed was that many of my reds and pinks really faded out. I did several mixtures of glazes to see if they would blend well, and I got nice results. Interestingly, I saw my brush marks from the white glaze underneath show through the colors. Several glazes developed pinholes, so I knew I couldn't use those. I also tested my underglazes to see how they'd behave as overglazes. They actually developed a bit of a shine on top while remaining more matte to the touch. Again, I wanted to see how they would blend together. These two colors looked really good. Let's try a simple design using the glaze combinations that worked from my samples. I bisque fired this to cone 04. I first needed to apply the white liner glaze, but learned that brushing was not the greatest way to go. I added water to my glaze to modify it for dipping, then used an immersion blender to make sure there were no chunks. As this is just a test, I only dipped the outside of the cylinder, trying to get the smoothest surface that I could. A bigger container would have allowed me to dip just once and coat the entire piece, of course. Using a steadied pencil, I gently marked banding lines at the top and bottom of the piece. I'm going to attempt lemons and pears. As I'm working on the fragile flaky glaze, I can't afford drawing mistakes, so I made templates on paper and blackened the back with graphite. I placed the lemon where I wanted it and lightly traced the outline. I did the same thing with the pear. I'm going to start with this light, warm-colored Pooh Bear stroke and coat that looked great on my sample. I'll be using 3 sizes of fingernail painting brushes to apply the overglaze. Starting with the largest brush, I coated the pear with stroke and coat. I did leave a little area along the left edge white to act as a highlight. I applied 2 coats to make sure my coverage wouldn't be streaky. I used the smaller brushes to get into the tighter areas. I did the same thing to the lemon using 2 coats. I switched to a bit darker warm stroke and coat color called Curry Around. I only brushed this on the right side and up a little bit from the bottom where there would be shadows. I brushed 2 coats of that. I did the same thing to the lemon. I already know that mixing the cantaloupe and the candy apple red worked well on my sample. Let's try it here. On some wax paper, I mixed the two for a light orange. I applied 1 coat only to the edge of the pear and a little where the pear dips in and might reflect the light on the other side. I did the same thing to the lemon. Using the Spectrum Black number 315, I used my tiny detailer brush to outline both the images. I also added a few little dots for detail. Now make sure you have the fruit painted exactly as you want it before moving on to the next step. The reason is that the next step involves coating the imagery with wax emulsion. You can't change your mind once that's down. Now I'm going to do a reverse painting technique. In painting, typically you paint the background first, then the foreground imagery. But here, I painted the foreground imagery first. So I want to protect that plus the areas I want to stay white in preparation for painting the background. To do this, I'm covering them with the wax emulsion. Now I can ground the fruit by painting borders along the top and bottom. This wisteria glaze turns blue at mid-range firing, so I brushed it along the top border. I can get a smoother coating without having to worry about damaging the fruit. I painted the bottom border with Spectrum Chamois number 319. I painted 2 coats of each of the colors to make sure I had good coverage. Now I can go back and wipe away any glaze beads with a sponge. Finally, I again used the black to outline the borders. Now here's a piece I painted earlier and fired to cone 5 with a 6-minute hold. I was happy to see that the glaze colors on the fruit blended well without moving or bleeding. On this piece, I coated the top band with 3 coats of wisteria, and I noticed that the glaze did start to slide down the piece in several places, which is why I only did 2 coats on the sample I demonstrated for you. Here's another sample I painted using many of the same glaze colors. I only painted 2 coats of the wisteria on the background around the tree shapes without any running. I love that all the colors remain vibrant, and the surface has a nice satiny feel. Let's try one more experiment, this time using the underglaze to paint the imagery. I started with a bisque piece dipped in the white glaze. I drew on my border lines and transferred my pears and lemons like on the first project. To paint the fruit, I'm starting with the intense yellow. I coated almost the entire piece with this, leaving a little area along the left side white for a highlight. I used bright orange and mixed a little of that with the yellow. Then brushed that onto the right side of each fruit along the bottoms and continued up the other side a little bit. I added just a little of the bright red to the shadows to darken them. Those colors are so bright, I decided to tone them down a bit by using cool blush pink as highlights. I then used jet black underglaze with a detailer brush to outline everything. Again, I waxed all the areas I wanted to preserve in preparation for painting the background. I tried this technique earlier on a slab where I used the baby blue underglaze for the top border, but the underglaze turned gray and streaked really badly. I thought I'd try mixing the baby blue with a bit of the electric blue to see how that would work out. I then mixed a little yellow into this mixture for a green and painted that to the bottom border. Here's one I made earlier with those combinations. I still didn't quite get that light blue that I hoped for, but the darker blue on this tones down the bright oranges of the fruit. I was happy the underglaze colors remained bright. The white glaze underneath gave the underglazes a nice visual shine. Tactily, the underglaze left a somewhat matte feel, but I love a piece with a variety of textures. I would call my experiments a success. Let me know in the comments section if you've tried this technique and what tips you'd give for the best results. Thanks to the newest members of our Little Street Pottery Research Facility team. If you'd like to join the team and earn a title, click on the Super Thanks button or the link to buy me a coffee. It also really helps us out if you hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. See you next time in the studio.